欢迎收看《家国纵横》，我是康凯。新冠肺炎的疫情持续在本国蔓延。总理杜鲁多星期二终于宣布，任何入境加拿大的人士，无论是否有新冠肺炎的症状，都要强制隔离14天。稍后我们通过 Zoom 视像的方式与嘉宾跟您一同就此来探讨。在多伦多，市长庄德利称，市府已经采取了一切适当的措施来确保市民的健康与安全，更推出了援助项目，帮助露宿者、长者等弱势的社群。现在我们就先看一看较早前的访问。Thank you so much for taking the time to let the Chinese community know the important message. So what Torontonians need to know so far under the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think they need to know that we're making progress on getting people to do the number one thing they have to do, which is to stay home and to keep away from each other in the context of not getting close to each other in crowded scenes or anywhere for that matter. And I think it's been hard for people to come to understand that this is something different than we've ever experienced before, and that it requires a big change in behavior, first of all, for people staying home from work or from school. Secondly, not going out, all the time, which we were quite used to doing, to the park, to shop, here or there. And thirdly, even when we're out doing something we might have to do, like go to the grocery store, we have to keep our distance from each other. And I think there's been a growing understanding of that as being the key to obliterating this virus and to getting back to a normal life. And I think that's been the number one message that I would say to people in Toronto is don't forget that. Like every day you have to remind yourself, stay home, stay away from other people as best you possibly can, and practice basic hygiene. And I think if we do that, then we can wipe this out.
When you are urging the Torontonians to stay at home, what you would like to say for those frontline workers?
Well, obviously, that's one of the reasons we're so grateful to the frontline workers, because they don't have a choice of staying home. I mean, people who are in healthcare, people who are police officers, firefighters, grocery store workers, they have jobs to do that require them to be at work, and in some cases to be very close to those who work in long-term care. So I'm just immensely grateful to them for having the courage to continue to do their jobs. And our job has been to make sure we keep those people safe in potentially dangerous circumstances. So, we're saying to everybody else, though, if you're not in an essential role, and the government has defined what essential roles are and what they aren't, please stay home. And some people have chosen to follow that and stay home from work and stay home and don't go out shopping or running around on the street or in crowd scenes. Other people have not. And that's been unfortunate that some people have chosen to behave that way, but that's always the way it is. If we didn't have people who broke the law, we wouldn't need police officers. So we're trying our best to make sure we get the message across and to enforce those laws as best we can. But fortunately, most people are going along and doing what they should do, and that will help us to get rid of this virus as soon as possible.
So regarding to those most vulnerable, like homeless people, like the seniors, is there any specific message from you to them?
Well, I would say to the homeless communities who are unlikely to be watching us on television, but who might. But more importantly, some of them have relatives. Some of them they have all the people of Toronto care about them very much. That we are doing. It has been the biggest issue that has taken up the most time of the emergency coordinating group, which is how to make sure we care for the most vulnerable people. And that includes two of the groups you mentioned, people who are homeless, because it's more difficult, for example, if they test positive, where do they go? In some cases, people who test positive are sent home to stay at their home for 14 days until they get better. Some of them don't need to be in the hospital. But in the case of a homeless person, where do they go? So we have had to come up with an answer to that question, and that's where we've got some hotels and other places where we've been able to take the people who are from the homeless population that test positive and isolate them there until they get better. In the case of older people, we have taken steps to basically order them to isolate themselves so that they're not exposed if they're over 70 to the virus. But what we've had to then do in order to make it possible for them to live by themselves is deliver food to them. And we have some wonderful programs in place together with organizations like Salvation Army and United Way and Red Cross to deliver food to seniors. And I'm very proud of the fact that that's exactly what we're doing.
Earlier this morning, we have heard the COVID-19 projection modeling from the federal government. And before this, we also heard a couple of provinces released their own modeling. So for Toronto, which is the biggest international city in Canada, as a mayor, do you have any concerns regarding to this modeling?
I will tell you that when I saw, first of all, they are models, and models are mathematical projections of what could happen. So they're not more than that, and they're not less than that. And I will tell you, when I saw the first kind of estimations of what could happen in Toronto based on the national and provincial numbers, because Toronto has 3 million people and represents a big part of the population of both Ontario and Canada, I was scared. I was horrified at the numbers because, unlike other parts of the world, we never have events that happen here like earthquakes or, typhoons or hurricanes. We just don't have things like that happen. And so as a result, that kind of loss of life is something that is quite foreign to us. The worst thing that would happen to us in terms of a loss of life would be each year, in the last couple of years, we've lost like 300 people to drug overdoses. And that's totally horrifying and unacceptable. We don't talk about it very much. But to hear that you could lose hundreds more, thousands of lives to this pandemic was something that was shocking. It continues to be shocking. And all you ask yourself when you're in a job like mine, or I'm sure the Premier or the Prime Minister or the Medical Officer of Health, is what can you do to try and stop that from happening? What can you do to get that number down as close to zero as you can possibly keep it? And that's what we've been focused on here at Toronto City Hall the whole time, getting advice from the Medical Officer of Health to do everything we can within municipal power, Toronto's power, to get that number down to the lowest possible number it can be, not to the hundreds and thousands, but something lower than that if we possibly can do it.
You mentioned earlier that to help those homeless people and those vulnerable groups. So regarding to the food bank here in Toronto, is there any emergency strategy or any shortage of the supplies for those people?
Yes, what happened was that at the very beginning of this, because we closed a number of community centers and because a number of the volunteers who work for the food bank and keep them going, some of the volunteers got sick or didn't come to work. And a lot of the places where there were food banks, like in community centers, closed because the community center closed. So what we've done to try and make up for that is working with outside organizations, including, as I mentioned, the Red Cross, Salvation Army, a whole bunch of different organizations, and our own civic government, the United Way, is we've established 10 food banks in libraries, temporary food banks. The library staff, by the way, who are not as busy because the libraries are closed, have helped establish those food banks and keep them going. We've had generous donations from companies like Loblaws and Sobeys and Heinz Kraft that have donated food. And so we are, through that and a number of other programs that we're offering on an emergency basis, trying to make up for the loss of the food banks and trying to supply the seniors, for example, with food delivered to their door so they don't have to go out. And I should just say that if people need more information about these food programs, if they haven't heard about them, they should call 211. 211 is a phone number that you can call in Toronto for advice on these kinds of programs, and they know all about these food programs.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other concerns or a message from you as a mayor?
Well, my main message would be what I started with today, which is please stay home. Please convince your friends, your relatives, your coworkers to stay home. Please don't socialize with other groups. Don't have people over to your house. Don't have play dates for your children. But beyond that, I would ask people if they want to volunteer to call 311, where they could record their interest in volunteering, or 211. Both of them would take people's names. And then finally, I would say to people, please be patient. Please have a sense of hope. We are working hard, if people do what they're supposed to do in terms of the physical distancing, to get this over with as soon as possible. We know that people are scared about their own health. They're scared about their jobs if they haven't already lost their job. They're scared about their finances. We're trying to work with the other governments to address all of those and to make sure we have plans in place so that when this is over, as soon as possible, we come out of this strong. And that's what we're doing, and we're working hard at it. And we thank people who are cooperating with us by mostly engaging in physical distancing and by staying home.
Thank you once again so much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Okay, all the best.